Time again for one of those cookery challenge videos, and again we're going to follow that format of just buy the cheap-ish things. Rules, there will not be many because rules make rules lawyers. So I'm going to go to a supermarket and I'm going to buy one item from each of these 8 categories: meat, dairy, dry staple or packet, fruit, green vegetables, a jar, a can, and something frozen. I'm going to try to avoid buying the things I bought in the last video and hopefully the couple of videos before that. But I'm not going to start maintaining a list of things I can't buy because, again, rules make rules lawyers, and that's just annoying. I will have the use of 1 herb, 1 spice, and 1 sauce from the kitchen, plus 1 tablespoon of oil or fat if required. Also, salt, pepper, and tap water, and 1 foraged item. Shouldn't be hard to find something this time of year. And from this I'll have to make 3 meals, one of which will either have to have a starter or a dessert. So that's the plan. Let's go shopping. Okay, that was the shopping. Here is most of the haul. I say most of because there's a couple of items I put straight in the fridge and freezer. There was a pack of mixed vegetables for 99 pence. I think it's a kilo of mixed vegetables. It's not the best value because you can get a kilo of carrots or something for less than that, but they're mixed vegetables and variety makes for possibilities in these challenges. So it costs a little bit more, but the chance to make different things exists. There's also 4 pints of whole milk, but this was £1.45. £1.20 would have got me 2 pints. So it seemed like a no-brainer to go for the 4-pint bottle there because it's just the best value. Anyway, of the things I've still got up here, pickled onions, 440 grams of silver skin onions pickled in spirit vinegar. That will be interesting, won't it? A 500-gram pack of crusty bread mix. Now, I could have got flour cheaper than this. I could have got a pack of 500 grams of plain flour for, I think, 50 pence, or a larger pack of plain flour, or even strong bread flour for not quite as much as this. But this is bread mix, so it's already got the yeast and stuff in there. In fact, the ingredients are wheat flour, dried yeast, salt, chickpea flour, rapeseed oil, dextrose, flour treatment agent, which is ascorbic acid, enzyme, alpha amylase. So this is a bread mix that you just add water and it makes bread. Now, of course, I know you can just take plain flour and make a sourdough starter. I've done that quite a few times before. But the quickest I've been able to speed run that in the past is 2 or 3 days. And we don't have 2 or 3 days. So, bread mix. And that was £1.19. For fruit, a pineapple. Can you believe it? A pineapple for 99 pence. Product of Costa Rica. So, a pineapple from Costa Rica for less than a pack of apples from the UK. Interesting. Can of chickpeas in water, 400 grams for 49 pence. Pack of salad cress for 39 pence. I don't know what that's growing on. It looks like rice, but it can't be rice. Maybe it's just shredded paper or something. Anyway, and then possibly one of the more interesting ingredients we've had on this series, a 462-gram pack of pig's heart. Now, Morrisons, as a supermarket, is very good for the meat and butchery because they have things that a lot of other UK supermarkets just don't carry. So I could have had lamb's hearts, I could have had ox heart, but pig's heart was cheaper than both of those. But they had kidneys and liver, of course, as well. But I thought pig's heart because, you know, this will be the first time I've knowingly eaten pig's heart. I say knowingly because I've eaten pork sausages, so I've eaten pig's heart certainly in the past. But it is just meat, isn't it? So it'll be interesting to see what we can do with this. It is kind of swimming in blood, but that could just be another ingredient. So in total, this, obviously plus the other 2 things that are not present here, the milk and the frozen vegetables, came to £8.05, which is not bad. Maybe a bit more than I normally spend on this sort of challenge, but it's Morrisons and they're not the cheapest supermarket. So tomorrow we've got to make this into 3 different meals, one of which has to have a dessert or starter. Tomorrow, in fact, begins today. We've got plenty of milk. I'm going to use maybe 3/4 of this to make some cottage cheese. Something a bit like paneer or ricotta. So an acid set curd cheese. And I'm going to set it using the vinegar from these pickled onions. So we will begin with, I don't know, 3/4 of this whole milk. I'll save some because we might need some milk tomorrow. So I'm just going to put that on a really gentle heat because I don't want to burn the milk. I just want to bring it up to a simmer. While we wait for that milk, let's just have a little taste. Well, I'm going to eat one of these pickled onions. We've got an abundance of them. So, silver skin pickled onion. Wow, super tangy, but how sharp is this vinegar? I'm hoping very nice and acidic. Oh boy, yes. So I need to decant about maybe 4 teaspoons full of this vinegar. That should be enough. Meanwhile, I've got a piece of cheesecloth here that I've just cleaned by immersing it in boiling water. I think we might be nearly there. Let's see what temperature we've got here. We need between 85 and 90. Yeah, we're very nearly there. So let's say 87. There we go. Right, okay. So, heat off now. And then with my acid. And just to help this mix in, I've added a little bit of water in there just to help it sort of mix in and not all be in one place. So we'll just drizzle that into the milk. Immediately I can see a change. Immediately it started curdling. Okay, and we'll leave that to stand now for a few minutes just to properly curdle. Meanwhile over here, I've got my big jug, I've got my colander, and then double layer of washed cheesecloth. Right, here we go. So to avoid too much splashing, I think I'll ladle this in. And so the whey is running through the cloth, the curds are being retained. Now it's interesting, I can smell the pickled onions, so this is going to be I don't know whether that smell is in the whey or in the curds. That will be interesting if we've made pickled onion flavour paneer. That does potentially affect one of the things I want to make with this, because we're going to try and make desserts. And yeah, a pickled onion flavour dessert. Well, who's to say a pickled onion flavour dessert is horrible? Most people, I think. So while the whey is draining out underneath, which is a really weird green colour, we will just wash up. Right, so after a few minutes have elapsed, you can see there is a lump of curd there starting to form. So what we can now do is bring those edges in together and make a little bundle. And I'm not going to squeeze that tight because we will just end up squeezing tiny pieces of curd through the cloth. So all I'm going to do is just wrap it up like that and maybe put a little weight or something on top of it. That'll do. And that will just serve to squeeze out a bit more whey. And if necessary, we can just add a bit more weight on top there to help press that down. Okay. So that's been pressing for about 45 minutes now. And I did come and adjust it just a little bit earlier. And so that's how much cheese we've got at this stage of pressing. And it's a fairly firm bit of cheese curd there. There's my little ball of cheese. I'm going to fold the cloth and just wring out the last little bits of whey that are in the fabric. And then when I wrap the cheese up again, this fabric can absorb a little bit more moisture. I think we have made onion flavoured paneer here. Yeah, I'm going to taste a little bit. I know it's not the day of the challenge. Yeah, we made pickled onion flavoured paneer. And that's not bad. But that does kind of nobble the idea that I had for using this as a dessert. So it might have to be a starter instead. Up with the lark this morning because I want to make some of this bread for breakfast. Now, the instructions say to add 320 ml of lukewarm water to 500 grams, which is the whole pack of bread mix. I want to save some of this for use in other things that are not exactly bread later today. So I'm going to make half of this. And also, instead of using water, I'm going to use some of the whey from the cheese making process. Now, this has been in the fridge, so I'll have to warm it back up. We'll have 250 grams of this. Now, I want 160 ml, half of 320, of liquid. And for our purposes here, 160 ml is 160 grams. It's a gram of water is a milliliter, and this whey is essentially water. 160-ish grams of whey. Got quite a lot of whey left. I don't know what I'll do with the rest of that, but we'll think of something. So that needs to go into there, but first I'm just going to warm it. I'm just going to warm it a tiny bit in the microwave. So that only took about 15 seconds, and the temperature is just lukewarm. It's just comfortably warm. So according to the instructions, this is not a case of proving, knocking back and kneading. This is a kind of single knead process, probably just to simplify it. Anyway, we'll go along with that. That probably does mean there's quite a lot of yeast in here. Time for a labour-saving device. It's quite a sticky dough, and I can smell the yeast in there, so there's going to be probably a ton of yeast in here to give you a really fast and reliable rise, especially as the yeast is mixed with the flour. So the dried yeast will not keep as well as it would if it was just in a separate packet. So they've probably overdone the yeast in here to guarantee some kind of a rise. So a tiny little bit of this mix now to serve as flour. Oh, do you know what? I can feel the yeast in there. I can feel the little yeast granules. Gosh, there's quite a lot of it in there. It's going to rise really fast. Dough out onto that floured pastry surface. And I think we'll divide that into 2 pieces. So there we go. 2 kind of Nice round rolls. They'll rise a fair old bit, I think. Now we could cover this with oiled cling film, except oil allowance is limited, so damp cloth. And it just so happens I have a damp cloth here because it's the cheesecloth I used for wrapping up the cheese curds. So that can go over there. I will put that up in the airing cupboard, where the hot water tank lives, and we'll have a look at that again in half an hour. Meanwhile, that's what the cheese looks like. It's now actually very solid. Flavourings today. Today's sauce is going to be tomato ketchup. Today's herb is dried sage. And today's spice is smoked paprika. And we have, of course, got salt and pepper. And today's foraged item is going to be stinging nettles. So let's just go and get some of those from the garden. So it's the 21st of May today, and stinging nettles in a lot of places are getting a little bit past their best. However, if you get them from a shady spot, like here in the woods, they are still worth picking. So there's no sign of these going to seed yet. They're quite big plants, but the tops are still quite tender. Now, if you want to pick nettles later in the year than this, then if you can find a patch that's been cut down and has regrown, then they grow again like they do in spring.
That's right. Put on the gloves. Don't attempt anything without the gloves.
I'm just going to pick the tops like that. The top 4 or 6 leaves. Right, anyway, I'll get some more of these. I need both hands, really. So, camera off now. So that's plenty enough stinging nettles for what I have planned for breakfast. I'll give those a little wash in a minute and we'll process them. But we need to check in on that bread because it's been about 35 minutes since I put it in the airing cupboard. Well, they've flattened out quite a bit, but they've definitely expanded. That can now go in the wash. This can go in the oven, but first, since we have plenty of it, I'm going to brush the top of these buns with some of this whey, which I hope will encourage some kind of crust action on here. Let's just have a look now. Well, it seems like maybe the whey on the top crust has done the opposite of what I hoped for, and it's given me a really white crust. Okay, that needs some more time to develop that crust. That's now the half-hour cooking time. I think we will stop there. There's quite a crusty little pair of buns there. Okay, time for a good hearty breakfast featuring actual heart. So, I don't know, if you're squeamish about this, maybe this is not the video for you. It is just meat. The heart is just a big muscle, well, and gristle. So what I'm going to do here, though, I think, is pick out the meatier bits of this meat. Pick out the sort of meatier looking chunks, because we'll use them for something else later. I've got a feeling it is going to need some slow cooking or something. Or maybe just chopping up finely. I mean, it's a very well exercised muscle in any animal that has one. But this is going to take some tenderizing, I think. Okay, so that's about half the meat reserved. And that's the meatier bits in there. I've got a plan for tenderizing that, don't worry. This is the kind of more gristly bits, and this is what can go into a sausage. Now, there is some blood in here as well, but that will act as a binder in the sausage. Blood is a relatively good substitute for egg. Aquafaba is a good substitute for egg in some contexts, not as a binder. Anyway, so all of this meat, including the blood in the bottom, is going to go in the food processor. Now, any half-decent sausage needs some filler that isn't meat, just to loosen it up, to hang on to the fat, and so on. So this tin of chickpeas, I have got a plan for the chickpea water later. But we're just going to have a couple of spoonfuls of these chickpeas in with the sausage mix as well, but not the liquid. We're going to have some ground black pepper, salt, and dried sage. Now a little bit of this sausagey mixture I'm just going to reserve. Not much. I've just got a different plan for that I don't want to mix with this one because I've got more things to add. So I'm giving these stinging nettles a really good rinse. And I'm using tongs because in this uncooked state, they're still capable of stinging me. Cooking will destroy the sting. In fact, what I'm going to do with these nettles is pour boiling water over them. This is just boiling water from the kettle. That will destroy the stings pretty much instantly. Because then when that cools down, I can get in there and wring out all the moisture with my hand. So that goes in there. Right, that'll do. So that's my hearty breakfast sausage mix. Too loose to be formed into a patty as such. So I'm going to form that directly in the pan. I have a tiny little drop of my oil allowance. There's about half a teaspoonful there. My weird sausagey mixture, and it does smell really strongly meaty. As it cooks, it will bind. That's the theory anyway. I know this looks gross. Okay, well, there it is. We're just going to cook that over a gentle heat to get it to try to set into a coherent thing. Right, that's had a few minutes sizzling on one side. Be brave now. Try and, yeah, it's not going to flip over in one complete piece, but oh well. It looks like our sandwich could be a kind of sausage crumble sandwich. While that's cooking away over there, let's have a look at this pineapple. This lot here, let's see if I can squeeze some juice out of it. Using my Simplex lemon juicer. Designed for citrus fruits. It might work. Just put some pieces of pineapple in there and see what happens. A little bit. Maybe if I chop them smaller. Actually, no, it looks like we've had a fairly decent extraction there. Maybe that's all there was. Now, pineapple juice contains enzymes that break down connective tissue. The reason it feels kind of soapy on your fingers is partly because the pineapple is trying to eat you. Gosh, it needs a fair bit of grip strength, this thing. Well, that was pretty feeble, but it's a little bit of juice. It's better than a poke in the eye. So these little brown eyes in the pineapple, I can just extract them with tongs like that. Just, I think they're completely edible anyway, but it's just the aesthetics really, isn't it? And so, do I want a pineapple ring for something? I don't know that I do, but once it's not in a ring anymore, you can't re-ring it. And then the rest of this pineapple cut into cubes. So a little taste actually. Quite a mild flavour. Sometimes pineapple is incredibly tangy. Not so here. It's actually quite a mild, sweet flavour. That's good though, because we've got quite a lot of other acid ingredients to balance out. Like, you know, tomato ketchup is the sauce we've got today, but that's quite acidic. And of course we've got pickled onions. So it's not bad to have something sweet to go with that. Right, so that core of the pineapple, I mean, it is a bit fibrous, but can we eat that? Not really. But it's quite juicy. And so, yeah, there's some more juice. So that pineapple is going to go in the fridge, although I might use some of that in just a moment. That pineapple juice, we're going to try to use that to tenderise this pig heart. Give it a little stir to make sure it's all properly coated. And back in the fridge, and we'll see if that makes any difference, because I have a feeling this is going to be quite tough otherwise. So my sausage thing's cooked, it broke up and it's quite crumbly and kind of a bit dry. So I think we need a relish or something to go with that. So we got the recurring character of handheld blender appearing. A bit of pineapple. A squeeze of tomato ketchup. And a pickled onion. Okay, rather weird looking relish, but predominant flavour is the pickled onion. Glad I only added one onion. Time for assembly of this weird breakfast. And I've got to confess, nothing here is going to be really much like I envisioned. So the bread is quite bready. I would say this might qualify as a stotty cake here. The sausagey stuff is just very crumbly. And although not completely dry, it is moist. It just hasn't got any power to cling together. So we're going to have to do that with sauce. It smells okay. Let's just have a taste of this stuff on its own. Obviously it's cooked very dark. Part of that is the nettles, part of that is the fact that it was very red meat. Surprisingly mild flavour. And not dry, but crumbly. It's like lots of little pieces that have got their individual moisture, but they're just not sticking together. There is this relish, which I've got to say doesn't look great, because it's not one colour or another. A bit of pepper. I was thinking that maybe I could cut a slice of this cheese and melt it on top of the patty, but of course the patty didn't turn out to be a patty. And paneer doesn't really melt as such. So actually I'll just crumble a few bits of that on there. Going to be a crumbly old sandwich, this one. Have some of that cress on there as well, because it instantly looks better actually, just from adding something a bit green. Put the lid on. Yeah, I'm not sure if adding the whey to this bread mix was a very good idea either. Lots of experimentation, and of course failure. Failure is a great way to learn. Let's see if we can get a cross section here without destroying it completely. Crumbly breakfast bun. Okay, here goes. Actually, it's not bad. Texture is just weird because it's lots of crumbs of stuff. Flavour of the meat is surprisingly mild, but this doesn't really hold together very well. One thing I just want to evaluate is this sauce with this meaty patty. Something doesn't quite go there. Sage versus the pineapple, maybe? Would it be better with just ketchup? Yes, just plain ketchup is better than that relish I made there. So there's a lesson learned. Shouldn't have gone fancy there, should have just gone for ketchup. That's definitely better. I mean, that's got both in there, but shouldn't have gone for weird fancy relish. Ketchup on its own is better than ketchup, pineapple and onion. Well, okay, I'll finish this up in a minute. Back to the studio now for a frequently asked question. But just before that, the Eva test. What does Eva think of hearty burger? Oh, well, Eva is a fan. You like that? Yeah? Good girl.
Studio Shrimp here to address one of the frequently asked questions from the comments in this series about refrigeration. A fair few people were confused or occasionally alarmed to see highly perishable food items like meat or cheese sitting on open shelves. This is normal for medium to large supermarkets in the UK. These open-fronted display shelves are refrigerated. These are chiller cabinets. They have an arrangement of fans and vents that drives a curtain of air down across the front of the whole unit, probably an implementation of laminar flow, which retains most of the chilled air inside of the cabinet. This might seem like it would be inefficient, but it probably isn't, for reasons I'll get to in a minute. I imagine these are probably common all over the place, but it seems there are some places in the world where they are unfamiliar, and in those places chiller cabinets have doors or physical curtains across the front to retain the cold air inside. We have those two here, and they are more common in smaller supermarkets and convenience stores where the chilled food section is fairly small and the flow of customers is moderate, so it makes sense to keep the thing completely closed most of the time. In larger supermarkets, though, I think if there were physical doors on all of the cabinets, the volume of customer traffic is such that these doors would be just constantly opening and closing all of the time, and so maintaining the cold air inside would probably be more costly, as it just falls out every time the door is opened. Also, the air curtain chillers are usually arranged in a block within the store, and because they're not 100% effective at containing the cold air, that entire section of the supermarket is normally noticeably colder when you walk into it. It's quite a nice place to go when there's a heat wave. I think it's also normal for there to be no effort to artificially heat the customer aisles in that part of the store in winter, so those chillers aren't generally doing direct battle with the heating system in store. So there you go. The meat or cheese or whatever wasn't on a shelf at room temperature. Those are chiller cabinets.
This meat, which has been marinating in pineapple juice for a couple of hours now, is going to form part of lunch. But I think I need to cut it smaller first. And I'm going to try and cut this across the grain. It does seem to have tenderised it a bit. It's cutting very easily. So I'm thinking about how much I really want for lunch. So I'm shredding this up fairly small so that even if it is tough, it won't hopefully be too unpleasant. So I'll shred it up into little chunks like this. Anyway, those bits of meat plus a little bit of salt, pepper, smoked paprika, and some of this bread mix. I'm just going to try and get a bit of a coating going on there. I'll leave that for a bit. If necessary, I'll add a bit more moisture. I'll add a bit of water or something. So I want to try and make a sweet and sour sauce with this. I've got a tiny bit of pineapple juice that I managed to drain out of this container of pineapple. And then I'm going to chop up, as finely as I can, a few chunks of pineapple to go in there as well. Normally when I make sweet and sour sauce, it would normally be pineapple juice, a bit of corn flour to thicken it, often a little squirt of tomato puree and vinegar, or lemon juice, but pineapple is the key sweet component. I'll have a bit of that in there. I don't have any corn flour to thicken a sauce today, but I have got this aquafaba, which is kind of the right texture already. We will have a squirt of ketchup in there, which will provide some of the acidity and also the kind of expected colour for a sweet and sour sauce, which is orangey red. It does smell very beany though. And then we want some acidity. So we've got two choices. We've got the vinegar as it comes from this pickle jar still, or some of this whey. Now, yeah, I think that's probably a more interesting flavour. Let's give that a taste. See where we're getting to here. It does need a bit more acidity. So we'll have a bit of that vinegar in there. Okay, that is certainly sweet and sour. Not sure it's sweet and sour sauce though, but that is going to need to be thickened up. And really the only thing we've got to thicken anything is this flour, this bread mix. About a teaspoonful of that flour mix in there, plus some of this liquid. And I'll just mix that to a paste here because we won't get lumps that way. This is going to be more cloudy than a corn flour mix. But we're working with what we got here. So when I heat that up, that should thicken. Okay, well that has thickened a little bit. That's good. And it does kind of look a bit like sweet and sour sauce maybe. But yeah, it's thickened enough to coat a spoon now. Yeah, it's okay. It's just a little bit uninteresting in flavour. But perhaps that pineapple will infuse a little bit as I let that stand. But anyway, there's a kind of sweet and sour sauce. Now I am going to use the whole of my remaining fat allowance, which is about 2 teaspoons left. That's all of my fat allowance gone there. We'll get that oil up to temperature. Then we're going to get these little chunks of meat. I'm going to have to be getting the hands messy here. Drop them in so they're separate. And I want to get those to go sort of crispy. Okay, while that's happening, I'm going to turn the heat down, just let those kind of just fry to hopefully cook through and hopefully tenderize a little bit as well. Meanwhile, that pan of water at the back there is going to go on the heat. Because I'm going to do perhaps the stupidest thing possible with the rest of that bread mix, which is I'm going to try to make some noodles. So let's say about half the remaining bread mix, so maybe 100 grams of flour, plus a little bit of that whey. Now, I can't overdo this because I can't bring it back, so I'm just going to, oops, there it goes. Just going to try and bring that together into a stiff dough. Now I've got to work fairly quickly with this because I actually don't want it to start leavening. I want to make some noodles and I really don't want them to be fluffy, although I may not have a choice. So I think these are probably going to be quite thick, doughy noodles, but that's not always a bad thing. I mean, there are such things as doughy noodles. Udon noodles, for example, are quite thick and doughy. Just keep on smushing until the moisture is incorporated. Now, I could rest this dough to let it hydrate a bit more. The problem with that is if I rest it, the yeast will start to work. I suppose if I did it at very low temperature, it might be all right. That's no use. Had to get the pasta machine out. If we want these noodles to noodle, it's got to be done. I think I'll do it in 2 batches just to make it a bit easier. And then I'm going to run this through the ribbons. It's basically the kind of tagliatelle type of cutter. So ribbons rather than very fine noodles. All right, that's one lot. And I'm just going to dust those with some of that remaining flour just so they don't stick together. That's the second batch there. And again, just dust them with flour so they don't stick together while I'm doing the next bit. Okay, so wrong type of noodles, wrong type of flour, don't care. Just going to bring this meat back up to temperature. I did try a little bit. That tenderizing has really worked. That's actually really nice now. Just delicate little pieces of pork. Frozen vegetables. Mixed vegetables. This looks like it's going to be a mixture of cauliflower, broccoli, and peas and carrots. Slightly weighted towards the carrots. And that cooks from frozen. It barely needs any cooking, but it can just sizzle away in that oil there from that frying. Right, that's all cooked now, so that's going to come down, and I'll put that sauce over there. You stir those things into the sauce, and then that comes off the heat, and it can just stand to one side to let that sauce kind of just work its stuff. Now, I think I'll just put half the noodles in at a time. Fortunately, with this flour probably being quite strong flour, there's a lot of gluten in here, so it's not that dissimilar from pasta flour. But obviously it's not the right flour, or at least it's not if you're making pasta, but I'm making whatever this is. First batch of noodles is out, second batch is in. I might just run these under cold water to stop them sticking together. Okay, time for plating up time. So the noodles, I'll just put a little bit of this stuff on them, mainly to dress them in that sauce. And then my sweet and sour pork and vegetables on top. I don't really see why that can't have a little garnish of pineapple. Do we want to put some cress on there? Why not? Since it's a thing we have. Sprinkle from a great height. There we go. So there we go. That is sweetish and sourish bread noodles with pork and vegetables. Let's give it a taste. Well, the noodles are holding together well. Those noodles are good. They're tender, but they've also got a little bite to them. The pseudo sweet and sour pork is okay. I have had worse sweet and sour than that from a takeaway. Oddly, the noodles have come out a lot like rice noodles. Well, I think that's going to score better than breakfast. Now, I said I was going to make a little starter, and I am, but I think what we'll do, we'll have a little bit of experimentation here, so I want to see what goes with what. I mean, it could be argued that what I'm doing here is a bit like creating a tasting board for starters anyway, but that's not what I'm attempting to do here. What I want to see is which of these things go with which other things. Cheese is incredibly crumbly. It's such a firm set I got from the vinegar from these onions. Maybe I used too much. Maybe it's stronger than I thought it was. Now, I think probably the cheese and pineapple will go. And cheese and pineapple, famously 1970s, on cocktail sticks. That's nice, except that cheese does taste conspicuously of onion. So I believe that does mean that the cheese and the onion will go. That's really good. Okay, what about cheese and onion and cress? Better. I do just have to try here. Cheese and onion and cress and pineapple. I think I know what the answer is. I think the answer is going to be no, that's one too many of the wrong things. No, actually that does work. That's really interesting, because when the cress and the onion are in there with the cheese, the pineapple just adds sweetness. When you have the pineapple with just the cheese, that little bit of oniony flavour in there spoils it. But when it's these three things with some of that, it works. Well, okay, I know what we're doing now. What we're going to be doing is crumbling some of that cheese in there. The rest of that can go back in the box. I don't know what we'll do with it. Maybe something for dinner. I'll have some more cress. That's going to be chopped up. We'll have a couple more onions. And that's going to be chopped up as well. So just a touch of pineapple, that's probably enough there. And again, this is going to be cut into very small pieces. And that's just going to get smooshed together until it forms something that will stick together and stay on toast, like a cheese spread. Now this, as I say, this cheese has gone very, very crumbly, maybe with a bit of some kind of liquid. So actually some of the milk, just a little splash. And this might curdle again because there's a lot of acidity in here, but that doesn't really matter. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Unfortunately, we've still got one of those bread rolls from this morning left. Like that. I think that's probably enough for a starter, 3 slices like that. It would be nice to brush those with a bit of oil, but I don't have any. Get those in the toaster. I will keep an eye on those so they don't burn. Yeah, I think that is sufficiently toasted. I'm just going to stand them up like that so they don't go soggy. Now, of course, what I didn't try in combination is toast. I think that'll be okay. So I'm just going to load these up nice and generously. And then, just so we can indicate what they are. Right, there is the starter. Let's give it a little taste. I'm not sure that this onion and pineapple combination is going to work for everyone, but I really like that. That was ever so slightly strange, but actually very enjoyable. Dinner time, and I want to make up some more dough, because I think I'm going to make some kind of stuffed dumpling type things. I had 125 grams left of this bread mix. That means 80 grams of water. And I think actually we'll just use milk for this. And I'll stop short at 75 grams because I want to make a slightly stiffer dough. 73 grams will do it. Quite difficult to knead a small amount of dough like this. Something like that will do it. So I want to make some sort of stew or soup this evening. I'm going to toast some of these chickpeas. Now I always think soup should have a bit of onion. I've never tried cooking soup with pickled onions, so that could be interesting. And all that seems to really be happening is they're breaking in half, they're sort of popping. Now, of course, one thing we could have had on the starter, on the toast, is some form of hummus. We could have blended up some chickpeas with some cress and maybe a little bit of pickled onion and made a kind of hummus analogue. It would have been almost there. Okay, I'm going to move that onto the back burner while I start the rest of the things. And this might be a disaster. See if I can get any kind of caramelization on that onion. I want to make some little steamed dumpling type of things, a bit like pierogi or ravioli or gyoza, those sort of things. So that's the ground up meat that I saved from breakfast. And to that, I'm going to add some of this crumbled cheese, plus a lot of cress. In fact, I might as well have the rest of it. As well as some more black pepper. This is going to look a bit weird. I think that'll do. Obviously, I can't taste that because that's raw at the moment. And then with the last little smidgen of flour out of this pack, I'm going to roll out this dough. I'm going to cut some rounds out of that now. Little ball of filling, probably about a teaspoonful. And we'll just wet around the edge like that. Okay, that'll do for now. Okay, I think I might re-roll these scraps actually and make a couple more rounds. I've got 9 at the moment. Yeah, I reckon I can probably get a few more out of that. I mean, the other way to do this would be to take a piece of dough like that, roll it into a ball, and then flatten that ball out. And don't use the cutter at all. So that works. So a little ball of filling in the middle. A bit of moisture around the edge. Not quite sure that's quite as neat and tidy as the other ones, but it works. So I have a dozen of these now. I think just to make sure that they do stay sealed, I'll do the fork crimp as well. We've got to think about how these are going to be cooked, because there is raw meat inside of these, so they need to be thoroughly cooked. A bit of non-stick parchment in each basket. I've got 2 baskets, so 6 in each basket, and I've got to leave a little bit of elbow room because these might puff up. It is a yeasted dough. On go the dumplings. So while those are cooking, I'm going to make the soup. And that is just going to be some of these frozen vegetables. Again, mostly carrots. So I'm just going to pick out some peas and broccoli and some bits that aren't carrots. I've got no stock cube, no stock. So again, it's going to be some of this whey. Some salt. And this is going to have some smoked paprika. So these little dumplings have had 25 minutes now. I should be able to take them off that paper and steam them on the open trays. Yeah, they all fit in one basket now, and the steam can get right to them. So I'll give them another 10-12 minutes because I really want to make sure that meat is cooked in there. That's more like it. All right, let's have a look inside one of these. We can see the meat's changed colour. The probe temperature was like 89, so it's definitely cooked. Interestingly, that cheese just does not melt. It tastes very good. So, time for plating up. This soup, I think, is going to be a bit weird because I had nothing to thicken it. I've got no stock cubes. I'll have a few of these dumplings. Now, these have puffed up a little bit, so they are a bit more bready than, say, a pierogi. And then these chickpeas, which I did toast, they're not really toasted. And the onions, a little bit of that liquid over the top of those. Camera died on me while I was recording that last bit. Let's give the soup a taste. Actually, that's not bad. The carrots have got a weird texture. Frozen carrots, when they're cooked, not that nice. It is quite a tangy soup. That whey is slightly acidic, and I did put a pickled onion in there with the chickpeas. Flavour profile wise, it does have a bit of a kind of Eastern European vibe to it. I think that is just the slightly sour broth and the smoked paprika. That's all right though. And yeah, these things, you can see quite a substantial pastry on them. But it's nice. It's kind of got a bit of a bite to it. So these are a bit like pierogi, but with the texture of Chinese bao. Not bad. The one thing that really does spoil this is the texture of the carrot. It's gone kind of woolly. And unfortunately, there is so much of it. Okay, so back to Studio Shrimp now, I think, for the analysis and wrap-up and lessons learned.
Studio Shrimp again here, analysis time. To sum up, I don't really feel like this one was a great success. All of the dishes were edible, but none of them were particularly outstanding, and I think it's fair to say I lost my way in a few places. Anyway, let's score the dishes. Hearty crumbly bun. This is only going to get 2 out of 10. It fell very far short of my hopes and expectations in pretty much every way. The meat filling was crumbly and unsatisfying. The cheese was also crumbly. The bread was weirdly tough. I probably should have made the dough with water instead of whey. The relish I made was inferior to one of its ingredients, cheap ketchup. Lunch, sweet and sour pork and vegetables with noodles. I'll give this 5 out of 10. It had some good parts. The meat, marinated in pineapple juice, was surprisingly nice. The noodles were not bad considering they're made from the wrong ingredients. The sweet and sour sauce was acceptable. And those frozen vegetables work okay when fried and then served in a sauce like this. Dinner, the starter of cottage cheese spread on toast, I think this can have 6 out of 10. It was simple, but it really worked. The fact of pineapple working when there was more onion but not less was an interesting surprise, and I think that garnish of surprise made this dish the high point of the day. The main course, soup and dumplings, this gets a 4, and only as high as that on account of the dumplings. Those frozen vegetables had worked okay in the thick sauce at lunchtime, but in this thin broth they were strangely woolly in texture, and this was evident all the way through cooking as I kept tasting them thinking they might be underdone and would turn tender any moment. They just didn't. At the end of the day, I had about half the meat left, about a third of the milk, chickpeas and pineapple, and about 2/3 of the pickled onions and mixed vegetables. So the nutrition calculations for the parts I used are on the screen right now if you care about that. Now, lessons learned. Positives first. Pineapple juice really does tenderise tough meat. I mean, I've heard that. I didn't disbelieve it, but I was surprised how well it worked. Straightforward experimentation with flavour combinations and permutations like I did in preparing that starter is just something I should do more of. Negatives. The cheap frozen mixed vegetables were not great. but I can accept part of the blame there. Maybe they just need to be treated differently. For example, I bet those carrots would be okay stirred into a robust casserole or served in a cheese sauce where there's plenty of other stuff going on. Pig heart is probably cheap for a reason. It's tough, which is a problem that can be overcome, but it's also not especially tasty. For something that smells quite meaty, the flavour was surprisingly mild. But what flavour there was not that enjoyable to me. It had that sort of cheap canned meat aroma to it when cooked. I imagine that's not a coincidence. I think in a real-world scenario, it would have been better to just try to make one reliable dish out of the meat, someone else's recipe. This is not a cut of meat that's very forgiving of experimentation. So if you know of a recipe for pig heart that's really delicious, please do tell me about it in the comments. I could probably have made some better choices in the shopping. A can of tomatoes instead of those chickpeas might have helped a lot with the soup, or could have been used to make a nice slow-cooked casserole or something. And maybe I should have chosen liver instead of heart, since I already know what to do with that, having eaten it many times before. So all in all, a bit more of a fail than usual this one, but I'm not downhearted about that at all, since this is all about learning, and experiencing failure in a safe setting is one of the key reasons I make these videos. Getting it right first time is great and all, but failure is a fantastic teacher. We should not be afraid to fail often, and failing kind of on purpose like this is a good way to take the fear out of it. I hope this has been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.